This is Alan Karpick with Tom Dienhart and our Saturday conversation, Saturday simulcast. And no shortage of subjects during this, what should be Purdue's first football game this weekend, or had been planned, obviously, for September 5th. We will be talking about our top offensive assistant coaches dating back to 1970. So that takes a guy like Bob DeMoss out of the picture, but maybe at first there's a lot of guys that some interesting discussion. We're going to do this in draft format and start with, we'll pick a quarterbacks coach, a wide receivers coach, offensive line coach, what else did I say? Quarterback and offensive line, quarterback, wide receivers, running back, and offensive coordinator. So we'll pick 5 different ones. I want to thank our sponsors, and that, of course, is the Purdue Union Club Hotel. And so far, so good with the students at Purdue, as we understand it. And the Union Club is serving folks in pandemic form, but they're doing that well. Beautiful facility, and we've had folks, a lot of people meander in there and see it, and a few people stay in it as well. So we appreciate them as a sponsor. And Tom, I'm going to let you have the first pick, but we're going to start, and you can fill it any way you want. Okay. So you could pick your quarterbacks coach, you could pick your whatever coach you want, but we will fill those 5 positions. And I will let you start with who you would pick first. And you could start with your offensive coordinator also. So fire away.
I think I'm going to do that, Alan. I'm going to go with an offensive coordinator. I'm going to go with Jim Chaney. How about that?
There you go. God.
Jim Chaney, the affable Jim Chaney, native of Missouri. Still calling plays in the SEC back at Tennessee and doing a good job there in Knoxville. Has been all over the SEC at Arkansas with Brett Bielema. He was at Georgia for a while too, with Pitt up in the ACC. But again, Chaney, as we all know, came to prominence in West Lafayette. Of course, arrived as part of Joe Tiller's staff from Laramie, Wyoming, and boy, was such a big part of pushing buttons on those great Purdue offenses for so many years, Alan. We all know the pyrotechnics and the statistics of those early Tiller offenses with Billy Dicken at first, of course, and Drew Brees, on to Kyle Lorton, and Jim Chaney was such a big part of that. Very smart guy, Alan. Extremely smart person, and like I said, also a great personality, a terrific recruiter, could engage with anybody.
Yeah.
Became a fast friend, as I always like to say. And he was a total package, I think. I'm just saddened that he never got a chance to be a head coach. I think he came close a few times, especially at Missouri, before they hired Gary Pinkel. But again, Jim Chaney, give me Big Jim as my offensive coordinator.
Yeah, and it's always funny about how history plays out. He was a fair-haired darling and should have been at Purdue. And he predicted himself. He was one guy that we were pretty close to as a staff member. We got to go to lunch with him a couple times a year, things you would never get to do now, which is the way the world is. But Jim was opinionated. He was funny. He just was a guy that and innovative and not afraid to, it got tough on him later on in his career because, he started so well with the 97 when he was a co-OC with Tim Lopano, but also how good Purdue's offenses were and how innovative he was. But he was a fun guy, bigger than life personality, is a bigger than life personality. He'd swear up a blue streak on the sidelines from time to time in coaching, but I think the players responded to him. And I always felt that the fan base at Purdue, didn't treat him well at the end of his career. And I guess that's natural. But what my point is that Chaney, I can remember talking to Chaney in 97, 98, early on. He goes, there'll be a day when they don't like me anymore here. And he was right from that standpoint, but he was an innovator and really just really good football coach. And I think that one's hard to pick a better guy than Jim Chaney. But I will go with my pick. Whew, this is a tough one now. there's a lot of interesting choices. And I'm going to take another one that was a guy that's somewhat maligned by Purdue fans because of what his head coaching experience was. But I think he was innovative as an offensive mind at Purdue, and I'm going to go that with Jim Coletto. And Jim was an offensive coordinator under Leon Burnett from '82 to '84, I believe it was, and also coached the offensive line, so he could be my backup line coach, I suppose. But Jim was a very good offensive mind. Obviously, he had a guy like Jim Everett in '84, where that offense was clicking on all cylinders, and he was an excellent assistant coach, maybe a better assistant coach than he was head coach. He went on to Ohio State, obviously, and worked for John Cooper as an OC. And I think that and then obviously came back to Purdue as a head coach. Didn't have that success there, but and didn't have the innovative. I don't know if innovative was the right term. Maybe it was a function that Jim Coletto had Jim Everett as well in '84 that made him really high in my list. But I really think that this is a guy that was also an excellent football coach, and whether he was coaching the offensive line, which he did a lot, played at the offensive line at UCLA as an undergrad, I think played on the Rose Bowl team. But that's a hard call because there's other ones out there that you could go, but I'm gonna pick Jim Coletto as my offensive coordinator. So Tom, you're on the clock.
Great choice. Great choice. I'm going to turn to my offensive line. You mentioned Coletto, terrific O-line coach, like you said, coached in the NFL late in his career. I remember with the Baltimore Ravens, coached that line, Jonathan Ogden and those guys. He was a tough football coach, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But my O-line coach, he's got to be Danny Hope, right? I think we've talked about this before. I mean, that offensive line that Hope put together there from 97 to 2000 in particular, the first 4 years he was here with Tiller, was one of the finest Purdue's ever fielded, right, Alan? I mean, we've talked about the personnel too with Matt Light, Brandon Gorn, Chucky Jacoby, Turner, on to Gene Murkowski, on and on it goes, the personnel. These people, this is a Big Ten line, Alan. This is physical. This was tough, and they knocked people backward. Drew Brees got all the headlines for throwing the football, but that line was such a special part of that run there. And again, Danny Hope, boy, to a man, his players loved him, right? They would go to war for Danny Hope, and it showed on the field. Yeah, he wasn't the best head coach, Alan. We all know that. He cheated. That wasn't because he didn't try or work hard, but again, offensive line wise, there were a few better at Purdue than old Danny Hope.
Yeah, good call, and that was what I was struggling with a little bit. Do you pick your offensive line coach first? I think he's really clearly. I mean, you talk about the absolute adoration that comes from the Matt Lights, every offensive lineman in that, Ian Allen, Chucky Jacoby, all those guys talk about what a great coach he was, and a very good recruiter also. We talked about in your show this week on the 1997 recruiting class, which is going to be a weekly feature on Gold and Black. You ought to check that out. But you talked about very much about how much he did a great job in Texas, and Danny Hope excellent in that. And you know what? The thing that's so crazy about this business is that we all look at head coaches, a Coletto and a Danny Hope, and their relative lack of success as head coaches, and we disparage them as football guys. That's just not really fair. These guys are excellent football people, and proved it year in, year out in their roles. So good call there. Danny certainly would be right there with mine. I'm going to go with kind of I don't know, this is an interesting pick, but a guy I just love, and I think he's a current guy. And I just think he is a guy that if you're going to have an enthusiastic offense, and I throw recruiting into this a little bit, if not a lot, and that's Jamarcus Shepard. I think he would be my pick as my wide receivers coach. I'm going to get him before you do. I don't know. You and I don't really talk about this much about who we're taking, but I love his enthusiasm. He's been that way since he was the first guy, I believe, that Jeff Brom really hired. And yes, he's been able to recruit. I'm not saying he's solely responsible for Purdue's stable of receivers that we see in 2020 or 2021 whenever we play football again. But I love his enthusiasm. I think he will be an enthusiastic head coach sooner than later, or at least at some point. He's still a pretty young guy, but I love the way Purdue's receivers play. Their enthusiasm. Yes, it helps to have a David Bell and Rondale Moore. Yeah, but Jamarcus Shepard is a guy that I would want on my staff for a number of reasons: enthusiasm, ability as a coach, and recruiting. And that's why I took him before you did. I don't know if he was even on your list, but
he's on my list. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just think he's unique, and in today's social media world, he holds up well as well. I know it's a little different; it's a big difference in worlds, but the way it was. But I like Jamarcus. So
good choice.
You're up.
Like you said, Alan, probably a future head coach, another tremendous personality. Never at a loss for words. Let me just put it that way, right? Yeah. Loves to talk. Okay, I'm going to go running backs here, my friend. I think there's a deep well of receivers coach I can circle back to, but I'm going to go with Ray Sherman.
A good call. Yeah.
82 to 85 in West Lafayette under Leon Burton. And Alan, you were around then, obviously. I was around, as I guess more students and whatnot and young professionals. But Ray, you know, I mean, look at the running backs. He tutored Ray Wallace, you know, Rodney Carter, Bruce King, fullback, played in the NFL too. Just some top talent. James Medlock was I guess a kind of a touted recruit from Waycross, Georgia.
Yeah. Got
there in 1984 with a lot of hype. He certainly looked the part when he walked in the room, didn't he?
Yeah, sure did.
But yeah, Ray Sherman. I think you know, Purdue isn't known for its running backs, obviously, Alan, but I challenge anybody to find a better collection of running backs that Purdue's ever had than during that period there in the mid 80s. Like I said, 3 NFL players carrying the football back then for Purdue. It was a nice collection of backs that Ray Sherman worked with.
Well, and Sherman, obviously, I think still coaching, right, in the NFL for the Steelers. Is he still on there?
Maybe.
And you know, and you've got me now to look back through the media guide because I'm searching. I think you're right, though. Really capable running back coach and a guy that great personality, very good recruiter as well, and really good pick there. As a guy that yes, the proof is in the pudding that Purdue had some really good running backs in those that era, maybe no better from that standpoint. And I think that's a good call all the way.
Yeah, Alan, real quick, list him as he was the interim wide receivers coach with the Steelers last year. That was after a 4-year absence. His last full-time job was with the St. Louis Rams, 2012 to 15.
Yeah.
But long career in the National Football League, Alan. He was in the NFL for years and years after, shortly after he left Purdue. So again, I think that speaks for itself as well.
All right, I'm going to go to a quarterback coach and one of my favorite people, just because a guy we got to know well, but also very innovative. Had several opportunities, coached the NFL as an assistant, and that, of course, is Greg Olson, the quarterbacks coach, who became the quarterbacks coach in '97 after the death of Larry Corpitz, and kind of came in late. But worked with that. And again, that was a pretty, when you talk about Chaney and Olson working together, and they did, they were good together. And Ole was really capable. And I think he had a great relationship with Drew Brees. I think he brought out the best in Drew Brees, really young guy at the time. And he was innovative, a risk taker at that position, but I think did a really good job of schooling not only Breeze, but just kind of getting that stability at that position. He was a guy again that I would like, and it would be interesting to see him work with a Jim Coletto as the offensive coordinator, I guess. But Greg Olson would be my pick there.
Excellent choice. Yeah, still coaching in the NFL, offensive coordinator. Yeah, just a bright mind, Alan. You always wonder if he's ever going to get a chance to be a head coach in the National Football.
Where is he now in the
I believe he was with, I'll double check. I think he was with the Raiders, but
yeah.
But and yeah, he sort of bounced around.
Yep, he has. He's been in a lot of different places, and been with the Bears.
He was in
And
St. Louis here with Jim. He got Jim Chaney to the St. Louis Rams for a while.
yeah, and they work together. So he's a guy that definitely gets out there. And again, he and his wife Lisa. Of course, Lisa coached track at Purdue. Was a head coach of the track program. Quite the pair, but he was a guy that was ahead of his time and has proven to have a very long career in the NFL. He is a football guy, to say the least. So
yeah, it's still running the offense with the Raiders, Alan.
okay, you got it. So
Good choice there. Okay, you got Olson as your quarterback coach. I'm going to go quarterback coach here. I'm going to go Bob Spoo. How about that, my friend?
all right.
That should make you that should warm your heart, right? Bob Spoo, 1978 to 86. Of course, he is a Boilermaker Letterman too.
Yeah.
Former quarterback, and Bob Spoo, just that period, 78 to 86, Alan, think of the quarterbacks that Bob Spoo worked with in West Lafayette, with Mark Herman and Scott Campbell, Jim Everett, all the way up to, I guess, to Jeff George's freshman year, right? Of course, then went to Eastern Illinois, Charleston, Illinois, a 1AA or FCS program, coached in Charleston, the Panthers for years, became an icon there in Charleston.
Yeah.
So again, Bob Spoo, like I said, one of those unsung football coaches that only the true cognoscenti, I think, really can appreciate, his acumen. He never got to be a head coach at the highest level. But again, those who know that Bob Spoo was a special coach. And again, the impact he made at Purdue as an assistant. Working with quarterbacks during a real golden era for Purdue quarterbacks, I think speaks for itself. You could probably speak more to Bob Spoo. Maybe you have some Bob Spoo stories.
Well, Bob Spoo and he started as a receivers coach, and then finished up at Purdue, and then finished up as a quarterback coach. Bob was just again kind of one of those gentlemanly older, just a long time football guy, and brought some to me some patience at that position. And even though when he coached receivers in the early part of his time at Purdue, he was a quarterback. It gave you an extra guy, certainly, that knew quarterbacking. And I do remember his last appearance as a head coach at Eastern Illinois, coming back to West Lafayette in 2006, when Joe Tiller was still a head coach, and in a game that was shortened by a thunderstorm. But Bob did a great job and coached. You think about who all did he coach at quarterback? Did he coach Tony Romo and all those guys? Yeah,
he would have told you. Yeah.
At Eastern Illinois. So that's impressive in terms of his ability to do that. And Bob, again, one of the great behind the scenes type coaches you'll find, certainly. So, all right, I've got to find I've got my offensive coordinator. I've got my wide receivers. I've got my quarterback coach. I need a running backs coach and an offensive line coach. Whew, tough ones there, just because. And I got Jim Coletto kind of as my ace in the hole.
Yeah,
I'm going to pick, because Jim obviously coached a lot of line. He could do double duty, but I'm going to pick my running coach at Scott Downing. And Scott, also another guy that kind of a Bob Spoo, at least in terms of personality, and a quiet guy, very close to Joe Tiller in terms of, a guy that I think Joe Tiller and him had a lot of conversations. Downing got criticized a lot because he also coached special teams and had produced special teams, had some problems when he was here. And that was much, certainly in the 2000 season, but he was a very steadying influence and some pretty good running backs. Ed Watson, Montrell Lowe, even Joey Harris. I think he was an offensive line coach, running backs coach until 2002, till he left the program. But Scott was again a quiet influence and a guy that I think as a running backs coach, you could do other guys. You could cheat a little bit and shuffle some other guys into that position that probably could coach it. But I like Scott from a steadying influence and kind of an assistant head coach type guy. He obviously went on to be a head coach at Northern Colorado, and I think he's in college administration now. still, and these guys are all still working professionally and getting near their end of their professional careers. Any comments on Scott that you recall?
Yeah, just a good person, like you said, Alan, probably underrated. Glad he got a chance to be a head coach. You talked about some of the personnel. Coach Ed Watson his final year. Remember, Kendall Matthews was a pretty effective running back that he inherited from Jim Coletto, Montrell Lowe, Cedric Brown. Talked about Joey Harris. It's pretty decent running backs there for a while, and then those guys always did just enough in the ground game to keep defenses honest so Purdue could throw the football. So, yeah, I think that choice of Scott Downing is excellent, Alan.
Okay. Round out your staff now.
Yeah.
You've
got wide receiver coach.
Wide receivers to go. And what are you thinking?
I got to go with Kevin Sumlin, right?
Yeah. I think Jamarcus Shepard, yeah, that's a good call because a guy obviously that's not only has gone on to a long head coaching career, but has proved his mettle at that position. But go ahead.
Yeah, Kevin, of course, Indianapolis native, rebuff Jesuit high school, walked on to Purdue in 1982, and became a very key member at linebacker for those defenses in the mid-'80s, Alan. Of course, post-playing career, we all know the resume well. And, Kevin, was able to come to Purdue and work under Joe Tiller as a receivers coach there early on. We all know the effectiveness of the Purdue wideouts there those first few years with guys like Chris Daniels in particular, leading the way. John Standiford as well. But again, someone from Purdue, Alan, that was really his jumping off point. And he got a chance to really start working his way further up the food chain as far as being a coach goes, was an assistant head coach at Texas A&M under R.C. Slocum. And, from there, of course, worked at Oklahoma and then became the head coach at Houston, Texas A&M head coach, and, of course, currently the head coach at Arizona with the Wildcats. So Kevin is a guy, I never forget Joe Tiller said once, he says, if you don't intend to hire Kevin Sumlin, don't interview him, because if you interview him, you're going to want to hire him.
Yeah.
And again, another great personality, smart guy, really smart guy, and a great X's and O guy who's learned a lot of football under a lot of great minds. Bob Stoops, R.C. Slocum, Joe Tiller. And you know what was cool too, Alan? Is when he was at Houston as the head coach, I remember he brought Leon Burtonette on his staff, sort of taking care of Leon, who, of course, was his head coach during his playing days at Purdue.
Yeah, and he had great success, obviously, at Houston, got him the job at A&M, had success at A&M. I mean, he did not have super success, but he had a Heisman Trophy quarterback. And,
made a lot of money.
Yeah, made a lot of money, but he also, expectations, you can probably never meet them there from that standpoint. So I got offensive line left, and I'm going to pick Bob Bockrath, who was on Jim Young's staff early on, and he was a guy that if you talk to Purdue, had a very good offensive line with Pete Quinn and Tim Hull and Dale Schwann and Steve McKenzie, all those guys at that era. Baki, as they call him, they liked him a lot at that position. They had others, that helped with Bockrath, but by the same token, he was well respected. Went on to a long career in athletic administration at Arizona, at Cal. I believe he was the AD at both of those places. But he was in the trenches, and Jim Young would talk very glowing about his ability as an offensive line coach. And I think, that I careful not to say that I know this, but I think Pete Quinn and company talk very, very glowingly about those guys that Bockrath as well. But that rounds out my staff. I like who I've got with Jim Coletto as my offensive coordinator, Jamarcus Shepard, Greg Olson, Scott Downing, and of course Bob Bockrath on my staff. And and then we'll do our honorable mentions, because there are several out there that I'd like to talk about. But go ahead.
Bockrath was the AD at Alabama and Texas Tech too, Alan.
Yeah. Was he at Cal as well?
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, but I know he has had a long career in athletic administration and has been well received as a cancer survivor. So he had to do that as well throughout his career, and really a. But again, his career was certainly not only in football, but yeah, certainly at AD I know at Alabama and at Cal, and I don't know why I'm thinking that there was another one in there, but he is a guy that was very well respected at that position. All right, give me some of the ones that were on your list and we didn't pick, but that you gave some consideration to.
Oh yeah, Ed Zombrecker, quarterbacks coach, Tim Salem as well. Fred Jackson, of course, went on to Michigan.
Did a great job in Michigan.
Assistant up there. Mike Seifert,
yeah,
was another quarterbacks coach who became the head coach at UNLV and, of course, Indiana State later. And
Sanford was a quarterbacks coach at Notre Dame as well later.
I think that was his son.
Okay.
Mike Sanford Jr.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, Dino Babers, wide receivers coach, Randy Fichter. Of course, Fichter's the offensive coordinator with the Pittsburgh Steelers, been in the NFL a long time. He played at Purdue during my era. Babers, head coach at Syracuse, also at Eastern Illinois as well. Bowling Green are some of the guys I had on my list too. Bobby Turner, running backs coach under Coletto. Edwin Watson told me a good story about Turner recruiting him up in Pontiac. So yeah, those are some of the guys that I sort of had on my list that we haven't really talked much about yet so far.
Yeah, Jared Parker is another one that was in during a very difficult time, but did a good job with receivers, kind of kept also Purdue's recruiting, which struggled. But I thought Jared was a first-class guy, and I think a guy that's obviously his stock is rising in the coaching world. He was the interim coach and really did a lot, in my opinion, to kind of change in his last 6 games, though Purdue did not win any of those games in 2016. He kind of changed got Purdue's back to playing really hard and with passion. And I like that about him. And of course, Jeff Brom comes in after that. And I thought he may have, and I don't know, that maybe just looking at from a distance to it, he set the table for those guys to really improve. Ted Gilmore and Jafar Williams. Jafar Williams was also on, I think, Daryl Hazel's staff, but a pretty good coach. Ted Gilmore still coaching, I think, as well, a wide receivers coach back in the day. Under Gilmore coached with Joe Tiller, right, as my memory serves. So, yeah, and I liked, some guys have really gone on to do some good things, and there have been some really good offensive minds that have come through Purdue and gone on to do some big things in the world of college and pro football. Parting shot, anything else that you can think of that is of relevance?
No, I think we hit all the high points, Alan. Some very good assistant coaches through the years of Purdue for sure.
Yeah, we'll look forward next week, and we'll hit the defensive coaches and pick them kind of in the same direction as we for our September 12th edition. But thank you all for watching and listening to this, and on what unfortunately should have been Purdue's first football game. It would have been at Nebraska, I guess, depending on which schedule, or Michigan, depending on which schedule you were looking at. Let's hope for better days on that. And Tom, we'll look forward to next week's show. And I want to thank our sponsor, Purdue Union Club Hotel, for their support. And we look forward to more of these shows. We'll continue these every Saturday. Always something good to talk about. Have a great week, Tom.
Take care.
All right. Thanks so much.